When analyzing film, or any art form for that matter, it quickly becomes apparent that the movies of a certain era reflect the ideals, concerns, and beliefs of that time. This is not by any means a novel concept. The idea that art reflects life is pretty common, and there are plenty of examples of this to back it up. Some major examples include 1976's Taxi Driver, with its reflections on the disillusionment and increasing extremism of the early 70s, and 2019's Parasite, with its commentary on modern economic inequality. While art as a reflection of life is far from uncommon, the inverse idea is. There are far fewer examples of single movies that have influenced direct, real-world events and mindsets. Taxi Driver, actually, works as an example of this as well, with John Hinckley stating that the film was a direct cause of his attempt on Ronald Reagan's life. This example, however, pales in comparison to another film, one that was not only a monumental feat for filmmaking and is heralded as the cinema's first masterpiece, but also as the catalyst for the Ku Klux Klan's revival in the 20th century and the terrible racism that resulted. This film, of course, is D.W. Griffith's 1915 film, The Birth of a Nation. The Birth of a Nation was a groundbreaking movie in many regards. It was the longest American film at the time, lasting around 3 hours and being held on 12 reels of film. It had an impressive orchestral score that was played live with the film. It cost an estimated $100,000 to produce and was the first movie to charge the same rate as live plays. It saw the first use of many camera angles, editing styles, and design choices that are still used today. Birth of a Nation was revolutionary for the filmmaking industry and helped turn film into a respectable art form. These aspects, however, are overshadowed by the themes of the film, mainly its depiction of African Americans, the Reconstruction-era South, and the Ku Klux Klan. The Birth of a Nation was the product of two men, Thomas Dixon Jr. and David Wark Griffith. The movie was an adaptation of Dixon's novel, The Klansman, and originally shared the same title. The Klansman was written by Dixon for a fairly specific purpose, to create a new narrative that would define Southern history and specifically challenge the cultural impacts of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. The novel sets out to portray the South as a victim of radical Republicans and the newly freed African Americans during Reconstruction, and frames the Klan as the heroic protector of white Southern life. These sentiments were present in the movie as well, which was adapted by Griffith. Griffith was an established director at this point, and he had already made 11 other films about the Civil War, making this partnership and adaptation fairly logical. The film is composed of 2 acts. Act 1 starts just before the Civil War, and Act 2 ends during Reconstruction. The movie overall has a fairly simple story. This story centers around 2 families, one from the North, one from the South. The children of each family are friends, and a melodramatic romance between the eldest 2 siblings of each family unfolds. In the first act, however, these families are torn apart by the Civil War, and the sons are all sent off to fight. These families reconnect on the battlefield, and the film takes particular care to emphasize their brotherly love for each other, painting the war as a tragedy, but one where both sides fought valiantly. This portrayal of the war, coupled with the film showing the antebellum South as peaceful and serene, fits neatly into the lost cause narrative that had taken hold in the 1880s and 90s. This was a narrative that sought to reconcile the effects of the Civil War by making the South appear noble in its fight and dismissing the root cause of the war, that being slavery. It had taken hold across the U.S. by 1915, and this film only added to its impact. To help enforce this narrative, a strong emphasis was put onto the historical accuracy of the film, with the melodramatic story being set against allegedly accurate depictions of major events. While there were still major inaccuracies in how these events were portrayed, this helped to legitimize the lost cause narrative and certainly influenced how many people viewed history. While Act 1 took place mainly during the Civil War, Act 2 takes place during the Reconstruction of the South. This act is far more influenced by the Klansmen, focusing on the supposed cruelty the South faced at the hands of the newly freed slaves. As a result, this act is far more blatant with its racism. The Southern family's town of Piedmont is taken over by the Northern family's father, and the main villain of the story, who's a mixed-race man named Silas Lynch. The film shows Lynch and the other black citizens of Piedmont taking over and causing anarchy, disenfranchising white townspeople, and specifically threatening white women. The concept of white womanhood and the need to protect it from black people is a major theme of the second act. The white female characters are frequently depicted as symbols of a fragile purity, and the movie has multiple instances of black characters attempting to forcefully marry or rape white women, with one especially awful scene where the youngest daughter of the Southern family commits suicide to avoid being raped by a black man. This rhetoric of needing to defend whiteness from black people makes the Ku Klux Klan the heroes of the film when they ride into town, depose, lynch, and disarm the black militias. Later, when the Klan is shown preventing black people from voting, the film makes this seem not only necessary, but heroic. This heroic duty of defending whiteness is described as transcending Civil War conflicts, with this intertitle being shown when Union veterans help fight off a black militia. This racism may seem abhorrent by today's standards, but in 1915 these weren't uncommon views, and the film released to widespread acclaim. There were some attempts by the NAACP and other black activist groups to censor the movie, saying that the themes and events would only worsen race relations, but these efforts were mostly unsuccessful and arguably contributed to the movie's success, with many seeing it simply to see what all the fuss was about. For a majority of white Americans, the attitudes of Birth of a Nation were fairly unremarkable. Many held the same beliefs as the movie to varying degrees, and this, combined with the technical accomplishments of the film, made people nationwide love it. It received praise as being the greatest picture yet produced. Critics waxed poetic about the splendor and magnificence of its spectacles. The film was the first to be shown at the White House, and upon seeing it, President Woodrow Wilson allegedly claimed that it was like writing history with lightning. My only regret is that it is all too true. Though this specific quote is heavily contested, Wilson and many other high-ranking government officials watched and praised the film. This was clearly a defining moment in both Griffith's career and the history of film. Unfortunately, the Birth of a Nation's effects did not stop at film history, as the rhetoric it spread helped to inspire a deep-seated racism and a desire to protect pure whiteness from its perceived threats in many people. One such person was a man named William Joseph Simmons, and he would go on to harness these sentiments and revive a brutal organization. On Thanksgiving Eve, 1915, a group of men led by Simmons burned a cross on Stone Mountain in Georgia. Simmons later declared the following: "And thus, on the mountain top that night at the midnight hour, bathed in the sacred glow of the fiery cross, the invisible empire was called from its slumber of half a century to take up a new task and fulfill a new mission for humanity's good." This was the start of a new Ku Klux Klan, and it was a clan that would eventually grow to have numbers in the millions. This clan's founder and imperial wizard, Simmons, was a somewhat strange man. He made many delusional claims and showed an almost compulsive need to join fraternal groups. So, after seeing The Birth of a Nation, Simmons decided to form his own group in the form of a new clan. He studied the old clan's rituals, beliefs, and practices, as well as those of the Freemasons and anti-Semitic texts like Henry Ford's The Protocols of Elder Zion. With this, he constructed his own clan's ideals and rituals and began to recruit other members. The Birth of a Nation did not only start this new clan, but was heavily connected to its initial growth. The film worked as the perfect propaganda piece for this newly formed group. When the film made the old clan appear heroic, it justified claims of the new clan being noble as well. When the film depicted white womanhood as something sacred, it encouraged audiences to protect it by any means necessary. When the film showed black men attacking and destroying whiteness, it made audiences feel that minorities were threatening white supremacy. Even though the film had intertitles such as this, claiming that what they were showing is not meant to reflect on any race or people of today, it still inspired these feelings in white audiences, and these were feelings that the Klan could capitalize on. The Klan put advertisements in newspapers right next to other ads about the film. At many showings, the Klan would parade in full robes right in front of the theater. Even after the film stopped circulating commercially, the Klan would frequently hold viewings for prospective members as an effective way of spreading their ideology. This new Klan, while still holding many connections to the original in both ideals and advertising, had its own take on the world that meshed better with America in the 1920s. While the old Klan was focused almost exclusively on oppressing black people, this Klan broadened its hate to include Jews, Catholics, and many other forms of immorality. It was aggressively in favor of eugenics, which was not only mainstream at the time, but lined with the fear of race mixing seen in Birth. The Klan declared that the only people who are 100% American are white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, or WASPs, and all others were not only inferior, but sinful degenerates. It had a distinctly evangelical touch to it, with pastors delivering fiery orations about preserving American identity at events. It also leaned heavily on the nativist ideologies that were sweeping the nation, claiming that the new immigrants were harming and destroying America, and it demanded stricter immigration control, specifically of the aforementioned Catholics and Jews. Catholics were simultaneously described as being obedient sheep following the Pope blindly, but also as insidious papal agents who already held control of major government positions. Jewish people were similarly described as both weak, submissive inhumans who also controlled the entire economy. Black people were seen as incompetent buffoons, yet simultaneously as plotting to overthrow white supremacy. This dichotomy allowed the Klan to play both the unstoppable, superior force and the oppressed victim, which shared similarities to the Klan in birth and increased its appeal to many people. Additionally, the open-endedness of who can be considered anti-American let recruiters emphasize or diminish certain beliefs to fit in with local sentiments. This versatility was fully realized by Elizabeth Tyler and Edward Clark, who helped grow the Klan immensely. While Birth was able to grow the Klan at a far greater rate than it could have alone, it was Tyler and Clark's use of efficient recruitment tactics and allowance of slight regional differences in ideology that made the Klan a force to be reckoned with. While the group had stagnated around a few hundred members by 1920, they allegedly had over 1,000 recruiters and 85,000 members by 1921. While the specific numbers may be exaggerated, the Klan still grew exponentially, eventually amassing an estimated 4 to 6 million members nationwide, plus countless sympathizers. This Klan was not composed of only poor Southerners, and in fact it was stronger in the North than it was in the South and had a largely middle-class membership base. There were almost 4,000 local chapters, known as claverns, across the nation, and these small, semi-autonomous groups were far from hidden. They openly showed pride in their beliefs and encouraged others to join. Klansmen would often wear their robes in public, and in 1925, 40,000 Klansmen paraded around the streets of Washington, D.C. In the 1920s, the ideas promoted by the Klan were not that controversial. They were, in fact, fairly mainstream. Nativism, eugenics, and a distrust of other races and ethnicities was common among white Americans. The commonality of these ideologies is what allowed the birth of a nation to succeed, and it had the same effect on the Klan. It quickly became a respected organization that had power across the entire nation. This power was then wielded to spread and enforce the Klan's hateful rhetoric, and during the short span of its reign, the Invisible Empire was able to drastically alter the nation. While the second Ku Klux Klan's ideas were in some ways mainstream, the extremity of those beliefs was intensified by the Klan's growth. Many historians dismiss the effects of this Klan due to how short-lived it was and the fact that Catholics and Jews were nonetheless able to gain more acceptance in American society. But the Klan's short time in power does not mean that it did not fundamentally affect American society and the lives of thousands. The Klan's impact was multifaceted. It operated as many things, sometimes a business, sometimes a political party, and sometimes as a social movement. The Klan was primarily a business to its leaders, Simmons, Tyler, Clark, and the later Imperial Wizard Hiram Evans. Their main goal was to enlarge the Klan and increase profits from membership fees, robe sales, and other ventures like music and film production. While making the leaders incredibly rich, it also brought a level of respectability to the Klan and greatly increased its size, as this was their central focus. This meant that millions saw the Klan as not only a large organization with members across the nation, but also as an organization that had to be considered in discussions of political policy and economics. This power was felt across the nation in many ways, and one major impact was on the fate of small businesses. There were often cases where the Klan practically took control of a county or town, with a vast majority of its white residents being members or supporters of the Klan. When this occurred, it was possible for the Klan to push out minority groups through sheer economic and social pressure. The leaders of the Klan emphasized the importance of only shopping at Klan-run or Klan-friendly businesses. Shop owners were encouraged to showcase their allegiance to the Klan by advertising in Klan newspapers and displaying symbols of allegiance in their stores. Those who did not comply would often find that no one would go to their stores anymore, and this was especially the case with Jewish, Catholic, or black store owners. In Tipton, Indiana, a once respected Jewish fire chief was forced to close his clothing store after being boycotted, and a report showed that many Greek-owned stores went from earning $1,000 a day to only $25. These town takeovers also had major political implications. The Klan was not able to exert this much social pressure alone, and its power was often linked to police forces, city council members, major business leaders, and even mayors being either Klansmen or sympathizers. Since the Klan had so many members in the early 20s, they were able to swing entire elections by simply getting their members to vote. This, combined with the aforementioned boycotts, the effective campaign strategies used, and aggressive intimidation tactics, led to the election of many Klansmen. Many others still allied with the Klan out of fear of retribution. This allowed for the Klan to enforce its ideals strongly and escape any punishment for violent actions. At the height of their influence, 30 states passed eugenics laws with Klan help, cementing their bigoted policies. The Klan's political control was intense, with the Klan eventually controlling many city governments like those in Dallas, Texas, and Muncie, Indiana. They were even able to control entire states politically. Oregon was the most extreme example, having the highest Klan membership per capita and almost all forms of government within the state under Klan control. At a federal level, there were 16 members of the Senate and many other congressmen who were Klansmen, as well as 2 Supreme Court justices. The Klan claimed President Harding as a member as well. Even if these claims are exaggerated, a majority of both parties were favorable to the Klan, with no major party condemning their actions or successfully passing anti-Klan legislation. What's more is that the Klan was able to influence national laws, notably the Johnson-Reed Act of 1924. This law set immigration quotas that favored Anglo-Saxon and Germanic peoples, limited Southern and Eastern Europeans, and almost completely barred those from Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean until 1965. This law's passage was led in part by Klansman Albert Johnson. Of course, when discussing the Klan's impact, one cannot ignore the large amount of racial violence that occurred as a result of the Klan. While many dismissed the Second Klan's violence, given that the majority of the members never participated in it, it still directly impacted the lives of hundreds of people. Most violence stemmed from the Klan's fiery rhetoric, which declared a need to fight against the Klan's enemies to protect the white race, and often white women. This clearly stems from Birth of a Nation's depiction of the Klan, which highlighted and valorized this same vigilantism. Many Klansmen set out to enact their own form of justice, and due to the high Klan population and police forces, these attempts were either allowed or assisted by the law. Some attempts, mostly those in the North, never escalated into lethal violence. Some examples include the threatening of a Vermont newspaper with violence, the detonation of a bomb in an unoccupied area of Lewiston, Maine, simply to announce the Klan's existence there, and the case of a black man named Arthur Burr, who was abducted, dangled off the top of a mountain, and forced to run to avoid being shot in the foot. Of course, it was often more violent than this, with the whipping, shooting, and lynching of African Americans, Jews, Catholics, Mexicans, and other minority groups becoming commonplace. In Oklahoma, many claimed that there was one flogging for every night of the year. This violence was not just limited to Klansmen, though, with many white Americans finding justification for their own racist violence in the Klan's rhetoric. The summer of 1919 is referred to as the Red Summer due to the 25 race riots and 76 lynchings that took place nationwide that summer alone. These riots and violent incidents often killed a disproportionate number of black people, though many resisted these attacks and fought back. The Klan's increase in membership is often cited as a major source of this violent increase, especially the multiple lynchings, as the Klan was experiencing growth at this time. The worst incident, however, occurred in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Greenwood district of Tulsa had a thriving black community, with 15,000 African Americans living there and running some 600 businesses, in spite of the Klan's frequent lynching and whipping of black people for sport. But in May of 1921, Greenwood was completely destroyed by a white mob during the Tulsa race riot. Almost the entire district, 40 city blocks and 1,100 buildings burnt to the ground. White rioters attacked with shotguns, a machine gun, and a plane dropping bombs on the city. While only a few dozen white people died, an estimated 2,000 black people were killed and 10,000 were left homeless. The bodies of the black citizens were buried in unmarked mass graves, and survivors were pressured to remain silent. This horrific act of violence shows the true extent that the Klan and its racial hatred has had on America, by not only controlling governments and subjugating minorities, but killing thousands in cold blood. When D.W. Griffith decided to make The Birth of a Nation, it's hard to think that he would have even considered the impact it would have on American history. It is almost undeniably one of the most important films in history, as it not only invented the model for the American blockbuster, but also reignited the Ku Klux Klan. This version of the KKK was able to concentrate the nativist and racist fears of white America into an extreme form of hatred. Berth's framing of black people and the Klan undeniably influenced the thinking of those who saw it, and the messages of the film appeared both in the Klan's ideology and actions. By inspiring a passionate need to defend whiteness in its audiences, The Birth of a Nation awoke a dormant force, one that would go on to have millions of members and would legally, economically, and physically subjugate countless people. The effects of the Klan are ultimately also the effects of the film, meaning that this film, the racist epic that jump-started American filmmaking, was able to fundamentally change and scar American history.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. But his soul goes marching on. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down on the grave of old John Brown.